Thank you for joining us. Looks like everybody was able to join from the waiting room. My name is Shay Ferguson, and we want to welcome you to the February Monthly Motivation Monday. I am a second year PhD student in educational psychology and research at the University of South Carolina. And tonight we are going to be talking about research practice partnerships. Motivation Monday is hosted by the Graduate Student Committee of AERA's Motivation in Education Special Interest Group. We offer this programming as a way to disseminate and share ideas and strategies for conducting educational research. This year, we are continuing our Motivation Monday format from last year by hosting a panel of scholars, practitioners in our field to discuss important topics. And our wonderful graduate student leaders have organized a series of live panels and discussions each month. So make sure to keep coming back. And then we want to take this time also to acknowledge that February is Black History Month. The Graduate Student Committee recognizes, appreciates, and celebrates all Black scholars, teachers, and students who have contributed to and continue to contribute to educational scholarship. We also invite attendees to share any holidays, celebrations, remembrances, or any other events that you would like to recognize in the chat. So feel free to do that now if you would like. And then we will also get started. We have some amazing scholars here to discuss research practice partnerships, or RPPs. If you've attended some of our other Motivation Mondays, this one is just a little bit different because we're going to have some groups that work on different projects. So we are happy to have Alexandra Lee, Lindsay Wood, and Jamie Engel representing the Aspires project, and Joanna Alley representing Black in Belonging. I'm going to first turn it over to the Aspires project team to introduce themselves and their project.
Sure, I'm happy to start us out since I'm the AERA MOTSIG member of our group. So my name's Alexandra Lee, and I'm a graduate student at Michigan State University. And I'm really pleased to have two of our great research partners here, Lindsay Wood and Jamie Engel, and I'll let them introduce themselves here in a moment. But it's really thrilling that we were able to, me and then also a couple of other graduate students who I want to mention, Brooke Harris-Thomas, who many of you may know, and also Samuela Mozar, are also AERA MOTSIG grad student members. And the three of us as graduate students have had a multi-year research partnership with a local intermediate school district. And so that's sort of a little bit of background about our Aspires project. When this first started, we didn't even have a name. And Lindsay and Brooke, I believe, put their heads together and created our name for our project. And so I think it's important to know that as graduate students, you can create your own research practice partnerships, and you don't need to wait kind of for your advisor to do this for you. So I think I would encourage you all to, as you learn about the projects, think about, what can you do as a graduate student in your local community? Oh, good, I see Brooke has joined. Yay, Brooke. So Brooke, actually, if you don't mind jumping in and just maybe saying a couple words too from your perspective.
Yes, I am in my son's nursery, so I will just stay off camera, but I am, I just was really excited when we had the opportunity to meet Lindsay, and she just was so clearly passionate about research, and in the presentation that she did, she kind of showed a way in which a partnership could look like between a university and a district. And I just felt really lucky that she wanted to take a chance with us, even as graduate students, but saw value in our skill sets. And it's been fun to work together to really negotiate what's priority, how we want to approach things, what dissemination looks like. It's really taught me a lot. So yeah, so much learning has taken place over these years. So anyways, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Brooke. So I think now we'll turn it over to Lindsay and then Jamie so that they can introduce the project and tell you a little bit more about it and themselves too and what they do with the school district.
Go ahead, Lindsay, you can start. Perfect. Then you can fill in everything I missed.
I'll do my best.
So as Alexandra and Brooke said, my name is Lindsay Wood. I am the research and instructional data consultant for Ingham Intermediate School District. And so for short, we call ourselves Ingham ISD. And we support 12 local school districts and 9 public charter schools in the greater Lansing, Michigan area. And even though I'm supported by a department of a lot of folks that specialize in data systems and assessment, I am the only research consultant in my department. And so, as you can imagine, that's quite a bit of work for one person to handle. And so I was actually at Michigan State presenting with Dr. Courtney Barrett on research practice partnerships and some of the work that I had done with her in the world of school psychology and special education when I met Alan Brooke. And I was at the time hoping to actually pick up a few people interested in some research practice partnerships, because our ISD at the time had a series of some questions we were looking to answer and some problems that we were looking to solve. And one of them was in the area of career development and how do we ensure that we are embedding career development practices into daily instruction and not just making it something that we do once a year where kids sit at a computer and take a career matchmaker assessment and then figure out, you know, the top 5 careers that some random assessment tells them that they're good at. And then they write it on a piece of paper and talk about, you know, whether or not they want to go to college and, you know, turn that into the teacher, and then the district turns it into the state and we check the box for compliance and then we're done. Further, I'm sure Jamie will talk about the fact that we run a career and technical education center at our campus, and we provide that to our local districts as one of the services that we assist with. And so we had quite a bit of data from that we weren't quite sure how to effectively utilize to make sure that our students, we knew they were gaining the skills that they needed when they were with us, but we weren't quite sure what was happening to them before they came, who wasn't coming, why weren't they coming, and then once they left, what was happening to them. And so when we met, you know, Brooke and Al, and they had similar questions, but they had their own little twist in regards to, you know, student engagement and motivation. And we saw that there was definitely an overlap in some interests and research agendas. I brought it back to Jamie and said, you know, I met these 2 wonderful, you know, PhD students, and I think they'd be a really good fit to help us tackle these questions. What do you think? And so even though our ISD had taken on a couple of smaller research partnerships at the time, I don't even know that they were sustainable enough to truly be called partnerships. They were more just data sharing kinds of partnerships where the researchers came to me and said, hey, I have this question. If I share the manuscript with your district, will you share your data? And we kind of talked about it as an ISD and said, you know, yeah, sure, that works, or no, we're not interested, go talk to someone else. So it wasn't even really a partnership, but we, you know, we're looking to get to the level of partnerships. And so I'm just so grateful for where we are today.
Lindsay, that was a good start to our process here. First of all, thank you all for letting us be here tonight. It's kind of fun to do some things that we don't normally do in secondary education, so appreciate it. I'm Jamie Engel. My title is Executive Director of CTE, which basically I get to be the liaison between the Michigan Department of Education and the CTE programs in our county. So I kind of support those and oversee a career center that has roughly about 900 kids every year. and that come to our Career Center. And then we have about 1,400 students within our county in CTE programs that are in the local school districts. Along with the actual programs themselves in Michigan here, we are in CTE land. We are in charge of career development as well for our local school districts. And in our district, as Lindsay was pointing out, in our county, I should say, before Lindsay and I really started down this road, in about 2008, all supports for career development in our county were pulled out of our ISD. So the local school districts were really fending for themselves, so to speak. And so this is not only been a part of our rejuvenation of career development and supporting students in their aspiration and goals past their graduation, but it's also brought us a completely new light on what we should or potentially should or should not be doing in the career development realm, and really joining across the state of Michigan, really getting some good feedback, particularly after a presentation that we were just talking about me hitting the clicker too much. We presented a few weeks ago at a statewide conference, and a lot of different areas of our state are interested in hearing more about what we're doing and how they can help and how they can improve career education for students as well. So we're looking forward to seeing how that pans out in the next few years.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. I'm now going to turn it over to Joanna, who is representing Black and Belonging, to share a little bit about herself and the project.
Hello, I am Joanna Ali. I'm a doctoral candidate in Ed Psych at NC State, working with Dr. DeLeon Gray. And the work that I do really focuses on the liberation, joy, and healing of Black and Latino urban youth, and the development of pedagogies that really center like imagination, creativity, and innovation. And so within Black and Belonging, I'm the director of curriculum, and what Black and Belonging is really just a collective of scholars, youth being at the center of this collective, educators, administrators, and other key stakeholders that help to structure learning environments where students are feeling a sense of belonging. So students are feeling accepted, respected, included, and supported within their institutions and spaces.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. We did have one more panelist that might be joining us, Dr. William Jackson, who represents the Village of Wisdom. However, I'm sure we all know this time of the semester or year is very busy, so we appreciate his willingness to participate. We think some things may have come up, but if he does jump in after, I'm sure we'll be able to get some great information. We are now going to turn into sort of more of a discussion-based for the rest of the time. We will have two different sections. The first one will be a discussion with the panelists, and then our second one will be a chance to answer any audience questions. But feel free to paste any questions as you go in the chat, any reactions. Some of the other MOTSIG members will, wave at me or something if I need to stop to read a question, or we'll read them all at the end. But, this is really for everyone to be beneficial. So as many questions as you can come up with, feel free to put them in the chat and we will answer them throughout and or at the end. And then for our panelists, I will turn it over. I'll ask the question and then turn it over to all of you to kind of either answer as a group. You're welcome to kind of delegate somebody. However you want to do it, I'm just here to facilitate in whatever way helps. So our first question to the group is, and you guys sort of already touched on this, but I'll let you, add a little more if you want to. How was your research practice partnership established?
I'll start with ours, and Lindsay, you can fill in the back piece. But in Ingham here, Lindsay, I think it first started with Lindsay looking for an opportunity to support career and technical education in a research, and we sat down one time just after we both had a couple of meetings and started talking about opportunities. And then from there, I believe, Lindsay, that led into you presenting at MSU and meeting Al and Brooke. Am I correct?
Yeah. So I've spent some time in the world of education and then also in the world of psychology research. And so I know that the two worlds are quite different. And I also know that there's a huge need for the two worlds to not be so different. For the world of research and for the world of education to get a little bit closer and to rub elbows a little bit more, and for educators to be a little bit more comfortable being open to research and to understanding research and to implementing evidence-based practices in the classroom, but also for researchers to have opportunities to conduct research in real settings that have context, and to be asking questions that actually matter to educators as opposed to questions that are just popular in the literature. And so when I had started working in my current position, I came to the job pretty passionate about initiating some research practice partnerships. And so I had done some digging in the research literature about, what are the components of effective research practice partnerships. And I knew that one of the big things that you needed to start with was having a mutually beneficial research agenda and making sure that your vision for the project was well aligned and that both groups of people were looking for similar outcomes. And so it wasn't just meeting at MSU and saying like, oh, hey, we both like similar kinds of sushi and you're really cool. And, hey, we both like career development. It was also making sure that we wanted the same kinds of outcomes and that they were looking to pursue the project in the same way that we were looking to pursue it, or that we could at least find a way to compromise where they weren't feeling as if they're, particularly being doctoral students, feeling as if their doctoral journey was being compromised, and where we didn't feel as if we were compromising our values and putting students first, and where we weren't putting our staff in a position where they might question how we were using our time and resources. And it ended up, every conversation we had reassured, I can only speak for myself, but maybe the other three on the call can, say otherwise, but the more conversations we had, the more reassured I became that our vision was incredibly well aligned.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your perspective. I've never heard this whole story before tonight. And definitely want Brooke to pipe in too. But that totally resonates with me that you'd done a lot of thinking about this before our initial Zoom meeting. So Lindsay came and presented at MSU the day MSU closed for the COVID pandemic. And so we remember the date really, really well. And we did have sushi. It was the last time we ate sushi together with other people for quite some time. But after that, Brooke and I both followed up with her separately, actually. And so I met one-on-one with Lindsay, and her questions were, what do you want to get out of this? How can this benefit you? And similarly, because we were taking Dr. DeLeon Gray's excellent class on community engaged research, we were coming with that same mindset as well, of how can we help them? And so I think it's interesting to hear that both of us had the same frame of we want this to be mutually beneficial. And I think that has really helped us sustain our partnership for 3 years now. And, as you can all relate to on this call, being a doctoral student has ups and downs. And there's been times where we've had to step back from the project and then lean in more. And we've been able to negotiate all of that because we have this really, I think, sort of established trust that we're both in it for the right reasons on both sides. And then I will say, I think a critical component for our success has been that we have multiple graduate students involved in the project. So when I've needed to step back, Brooke can step in, and Samuela, who's not here, but she's also stepped up to the plate numerous times. And so I think having 3 of us, and Samuela is only in year 3 of graduate school, Brooke and I are both year 5, so we sort of have some longevity with that too. So I think I'd really try to, I think the partnership on our MSU side of the house with multiple graduate students working together has been really key to us sustaining this over the long haul. So yeah, I'm curious to hear what Brooke thinks.
I think Brooke had to step out for a moment.
Yes, I think she said she'd be right back.
Oh, okay, well, we'll hear from her later. Oh, I see now.
And Joanna, did you want to add anything
Yeah,
for
I just wasn't
how
sure.
yours went?
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah, no,
want
you're good.
Yeah, so our research practice partnership really started in an interesting way, where it started as me as a teacher and Dr. DeLeon Gray coming into my classroom and doing research. And so this was 8 years ago, and he worked in my middle school for about 3 years. And I think after maybe the first year, I was asking him questions about like, how do I get on the other side of this? I really love the research that you're doing. And it was just something really interested in. Right away, when he came into our school, he was treating teachers as professionals. He was bringing us into PDs and he was telling us like, you know, there's this research that you all have access to. If you have any questions, if you want to go to grad school, like I'm here for you as a resource. And so that's really how I went into going to NC State and going into a doctoral program and then being on the other side of the research. So I've sort of been on both sides and played this dual role. And so I'm now doing my dissertation. Will be my last year next year in my program, but just seeing how like now I'm now in schools and I do a lot of like subbing and I'm back in the classroom because I felt like as I was away for those like 4 years in grad school, like you forget things, even though you were a teacher, you forget how it is in the trenches when you're gone for a long time. And I went back in the classroom, I'm like, oh wow, like there's some things I need to reconsider. So I'm sure we'll get to those questions later about like those details, but it really was just that connection. And then from there, just the networks that we continue to make and build. It started with us like asking actively, like, hey, what do you need? What do you want? We have resources. What are you interested in knowing about your students? And just asking them how we can do research. At one school, it started at the school where we both started, and then it grew to another school. And then it became where like they were reaching out to us. At first we were kind of, like asking and trying to get them to want our resources. And then it became a thing where now we have to say, okay, well, we may not have the capacity for that right now, but now we're having people come to us. Our school district that we work in Durham Public Schools, they just got like $18 million. And we have people reaching out, like the director of CTE and the director of like building schools. They're like, reaching out like, hey, can you help us? How do we like get the student voice in there with like what we're trying to do with this money? So it's really been just from the ground up, just building networks and authentically like caring about what's happening in the community that we're working in.
Wow, that all sounds so incredible. And I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, so somewhat close maybe, but that sounds really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Our next question, and I'll pose it to whoever wants to start. How can research practice partnerships best support your community?
Joanna, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I'll start us off on this one. And so really, I would say through centering the voices of students, through whatever we've been doing, it's always been with students. Last year, we were fortunate enough, some of you were there to bring students to ARA and to present with us. And so just really centering that, using YPAR, Youth Participatory Action Research, in the things that we do. So whether it's that we're like trying to build curriculum with teachers or do a PD, even if it's not like directly something that we're doing for students, we still include students in that process, even if it's just bringing them along with us to see what we're doing, to see what it's like to be a researcher. And then once, you know, they want to speak and use their voice, then they're able to just do things in a flexible way in whatever capacity. So really, yeah, just being able to center the voices of youth and whatever we're doing is, and I'm like, what was the question again? Oh yeah, so that's how it's like, how it's best supported our community.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll turn it over to the Aspires project, whoever wants to chat on your end.
I'll just give kind of a large overview. So one of the aspects that in our community that I'm seeing with this in particular is organizations that support education or support businesses, like our Lansing Regional Chamber. We have some other nonprofits in our area that are really supporting bringing businesses into the community, are seeing what we're doing and hearing about it and very interested in how we progress and how they can support students in gaining the right careers to help them be successful in the businesses later on in our community. So it's a piece that we don't normally do in K-12, particularly in Michigan, of really connect with those business partnerships and build pipelines for students so that they have places to go, so they have opportunities, and to go one step further the conversation about how do the businesses actually support these kids through their education versus getting them when they're done. So whether that's a trade school or post-secondary training, 4-year associate, whatever it may be, they're interested in these conversations which they haven't been in a while. So it's a really good piece that I think is gonna in years to come is gonna pan out very well for kids.
Yeah, I think I'd summarize it as the partnership breaks down silos. It really forces a lot of different voices to come to the table in order to problem solve the question at hand. And as Jamie said, it brings together industry, it brings together research, it brings together practice, and even within our own organization, it's brought together a bunch of different departments that wouldn't have otherwise worked together. I'm going to call out Michigan State and say it's broken down some silos at Michigan State. We've had meetings with the admissions office at Michigan State when they heard about our project, and they were like, wait a second, we might be able to use parts of this project to help connect students and give them a better sense of belonging when they start coming to our campus. Like, how do we get involved? And I think that's, I love how Joanna keeps using that word, like community, and elevating the voices of the people that matter, and breaking down that silo of even just teachers and students. Like, our project elevates the voices of teachers and students, and what are their experiences, how are what are their lived experiences, and treating teachers as professionals, treating students as people that matter, people whose experiences that matter, and families whose families as people whose experiences matter. And so when you have a partnership, it's no longer just a silo where I do my thing and you do your thing and they do their thing. It really brings that word community, and it forces you to live it out.
Yeah, I think one other just thing to mention about our partnership is that it directly relates to a Michigan state government policy. So the state government passed a policy that required students to do career planning and career development. And it's called the Michigan Career Development Plan. I think Jamie and Lindsay would know, they can correct me. But that's been an interesting piece for me as a educational psychology researcher, is thinking about this policy implications too of this work, and really testing how did this, state level policy, how does it actually look on the ground in schools, and how is it being implemented? And so I think that's another thing that I've heard, spoken about at ARA and APA and some of the conferences we've all been a part of, is trying to get educational psychology to work better with policy. And so that's been another unique part of our partnership. And Jamie and Lindsay are so good at going around town and spreading our message that we actually had a meeting with our Michigan Department of Education sharing our work. And I was just astounded that I was, on a Zoom call with state level policy folks as a graduate student, right? And as an educational psychologist, because we have been so traditionally siloed. So I think that has some real direct implications. And to Lindsay's point, yeah, I mean, we had a meeting with admissions and I'd never met these people. I'd never even been in the building before at the MSU campus. So certainly breaking down silos within our own institution too. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That sounds pretty amazing. And I saw Brooke's comment in the chat that she said, and knowledge holders. I think that's probably a big thing, is recognizing that everybody has knowledge to bring to the table, not just one person or vice versa. So thank you, Brooke, for that as well. Our next question to the group is, if you had to highlight one aspect of your partnership, what do you appreciate the most?
I can go. So I would say what I appreciate most would probably be the authentic relationships, the community that has been built that really honestly feels like family now. And like I said, we've been in the game for a really long time, and it takes a while to do that. We've been working within DPS and with students for 8 years now. So we have students who are middle schoolers who are now in college, and just being in spaces where we did an event where when the new Black Panther movie came out, we all just went and had fun, just spaces of where it's not about research, it's not about anything, but just coming together in community to do things that bring us joy. And so just having that space where work doesn't necessarily feel like work all the time. And we're in a community space where we authentically love and care about each other. Has really been what I appreciate most about this work.
I would say the thing that I appreciate the most is, Joanna stole the best one. It does feel like a team. The authentic relationships that you gain with people, there's nothing sweeter than that. It really does feel like a family. But I'd say a close second, just to highlight a different aspect, is that my thinking is constantly pushed. And it's a group of people where, because my thinking is pushed, I'm able to vision cast, and I'm able to dream big dreams and think big thoughts. And I'm pushed out of my bubble of the daily grind, and I'm rubbing elbows with people who do jobs that are so different from mine. And to be quite honest, there are people on our team that I don't even know what they do all the time. And that's okay. I don't need to know what they do all the time. All I know is that they're really important, and that there are certain things that they contribute to our team that our team wouldn't function if they weren't there. And so the diversity of thought and the way that I myself am able to grow personally and professionally because of the interactions that I have with people that would otherwise be outside of my normal bubble of those that I interact with, is something that I really appreciate.
Joanna and Lindsay, you both said very similar thoughts. You did probably a much better job than what I could say. But the only other thing that I would add to it is very similar to what Lindsay was just mentioning about this type of work is very different than anything that I've ever done before. You know, as a teacher, as a principal, and then moving on up into different positions, you just don't get the opportunity to do that. So it pushes your thinking in a very different way, and it's absolutely fabulous. And being able to bring other aspects or other staff members that we have in the CTE world into this project has really given them new opportunities and new light and new visions for different opportunities down the road as well. So it rejuvenates, particularly in a very unfortunate time of COVID and not being able to meet in person, and navigating through that and building some relationships that we didn't have before.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add. I was gonna say it's so fun. Like I just have fun with Lindsay and Jamie and everyone else at the EMISD that we've worked with, and I always look forward to our meetings, and it's been very like filling for me over the years. They're just fun folks to hang out with. We have a good time. So to Joanna's point, like, you know, getting ice cream and hanging out at a conference, and the practitioner conference for me, in terms of my own personal and professional development that we did a few weeks ago, was really helpful. It was really helpful for me to see Lindsay and Jamie and to work with them on how to translate research findings to practitioner audiences. And who better to learn that from than practitioners, than our partners. And we actually have been working with a marketing and communications person from the school district, and that was a really eye-opening learning experience for me too. And so I think, so I've learned a lot professionally through our partnership around these skills that are really hard to learn in graduate school. So making one-pagers and, you know, marketing documents that we're not really necessarily trained on making. So it's been really, really fun and very, in all sorts of ways.
Sounds really great. I couldn't agree more that I feel like we're not always taught how to translate it to practitioners, but hopefully through relationships like this and grad students attending these types of webinars, we're able to learn a little bit more. So thank you for sharing that. We had a follow-up question, and we're doing good on time, so we'll interject this one now. How does the support remain consistent?
Can you clarify support from which side?
Yes, Arun, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So this could be on either way, like as in, since it's a partnership, I think it could be from the community or it could be from the researchers. But like, I think there is this, you know, two-way street kind of setup, right? Like, and so I'm just trying to see how that consistency kind of comes into place, and who takes the lead, or is it like, you know, it's like a teamwork, so somebody takes the lead once and then the other person kind of, you know, follows on, and then it just kind of flips after a while, or it just dies down, like, you know, after a while the partnership just dies down. I don't know.
I can start with, so I think for us, what sustains our partnership is us staying in that community. I think a lot of times we come in and we do research and we're like on to the next school or research or like place, but we have really just stayed consistent with what they need. Of course, there's a lot of turnover in schools oftentimes. So coming in and continuing to make connections and networks. I know that like the school that I used to work at, there's probably like one or two people that are still there. And so like I had to come in and like just do things at the school to meet students again and to meet, you know, like administrators again who I don't know. And I feel like, you know, a whole new person in that space. But I think it just takes being in that space for reasons other than research to kind of sustain that partnership. And then they see that you're there for the right reasons and they start asking for things, or you can, like partner and do things. And I think it's just really consistency and the stability of like continuing to be in the same space as opposed to like going, finishing one project, treating it like a project and then moving on to like another place or space.
Great.
And
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Jamie, you go.
in our realm, in Al, Lindsay, and Brooke, if you're still on, I would say it's not kind of similar to what Joanna was just saying. It's not an ending. Nothing's ending. It's just changing. And everybody in our group seems to pick up a new role when it's needed. And instead of one person leading, I think is where you were going to. We seem to switch on whatever is needed at the time in order to get us to what we're trying to accomplish in the short term. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, we're all
I
pretty
did,
honest.
oh, go ahead, Lindsay.
Oh, sorry. We're all pretty honest about our strengths and weaknesses. It's something that at this point, because of that family relationship that we've built, we don't need to hide. Like, there's no need for pretense. I can tell you that I suck at something and I'm not the person to do it. Or I can tell you, you know what, like, hey, I could take that on. Like, I think I'd be okay with that. And so whenever there's an action to be taken, we've gotten a lot better about making sure that that's automatically delegated. And so we, are really consistent with meeting agendas and note taking and making sure that with every action, there's someone assigned to it and there's a date put next to it, and bringing a communications person onto our team, because we have that resource, we're lucky enough to have it, has helped a lot to make sure that things get communicated and that we're sticking to our timeline. But I think the key piece of just being that, like, we're able to be frank about our strengths and weaknesses and what we're capable of doing, and even just busy schedules. Someone being able to say, I'm swamped this month. Like, I know normally I do this, but I can't this month. Is there someone else that could pick it up? And putting, that whoever that new person is, like putting their name on the agenda next to that item, so that we know when we meet that next month who's gonna pick it up and who's gonna take care of it for that month until the normal person can get back to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think all of those things are super helpful. And I think for our side, as graduate students, from the get-go, we were, concerned about, how do we sustain this thing? And, Brooke and I still want to be involved, I'm sure, at some level, even next year after we graduate, but we also recognize we're going to have to step back a little bit. And so we're like actively right now starting to strategize and prepare for us to step back from the project next year. And so how we're doing that is we have now a group of other researchers that we've brought on board. So I have a former colleague who's actually not a graduate student, but she's interested in education research. So she's in the mix. We have an undergraduate researcher who was a graduate who graduated from the school district we're partnering in. She's now on our team. We have less senior graduate students, and we actually just recruited one more, Jamie and Lindsay. You'll meet at our next meeting. So Brooke and I have been kind of like hustling on the MSU side of things to make sure we're like have a big bench essentially, so that if we need to, step out, we've got someone that we tag right in. And it is all about delegating and recognizing, Samuela can do a lit review a lot better than I can. She loves them. I don't love them. So she's going to do that. And how can we tap our undergraduate researcher and really use her to her full capacity and have her test the survey and do think alouds on the survey and things like that, so that's what we've been doing on our side of the house to make sure that our partnerships sustain regardless of where Brooke and I end up next year after we graduate.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. It sounds like a lot of work goes on behind the scenes to keep everything moving and to keep that support. It's not necessarily just one person always doing everything, but continuously switching it up. We'll move on to our next question. Then we do have a panelist question as well. So I'll get to this one and then we'll jump there. Our next question is, what hopes or dreams do you have for your partnership?
I go first. So I think just going along with that last question, I think sustainability, just really creating a pipeline of students and educators that will continue this work. And the beauty of like being there for so long is that we continue to develop new partnerships and to kind of grow the community so that it can be self-sustaining. And so like just thinking about like middle schoolers who now have high schoolers who are mentors and who are, you know, now about to go to college and who may go to grad school, you know, and like continue the cycle of work. So I would say like sustainability and continuing this pipeline of work and the community.
That Joanna, you hit it for us as well. I think is how do we continue? And Al was just mentioning that as well. How do we continue this work and down the road and continue to improve opportunities for kids?
Yeah, I mean, and not just from a personnel standpoint, like how do we keep our team large enough that the project continues, but also spreading awareness and having community buy-in and staff and student buy-in to the point where the project has so much energy behind it that it just couldn't stop. Like it has so many people supporting it, whether they're on the team or not. Like the community just couldn't imagine the project going away.
Yeah, and I think this is really aspirational, but we are right now in the middle of data collection for sort of a second phase of research. And once we sort of get our findings together, I'd love to really see those shared across all of Michigan so that other school districts can benefit from our research work and what we're finding out about how to support students' career development and career exploration. And like kind of beyond that, you know, so I think like if Ingham ISD can use the information, that's awesome. We're really happy about that. But if all the other districts in Michigan can use it, and then even more than that, if like districts across the country can use the information to better help students with their career planning, I think that would be a huge goal of the project. That's super aspirational and longer term.
That's well said.
Excellent. Yes. Lindsay, did you have anything else to add?
On a more like logistical level, we've also talked about right now our team is all adults. We, the youngest person we have is, a freshman at Michigan State. And so we've talked about in the near future creating a like student advisory panel to help with a lot of the vision casting and implementation components. Because when you're talking about student career development and how you're implementing that in an educational setting, you definitely want student voice for that. And so thinking through, what does that look like? And particularly at the secondary level, the state law for Michigan, where you have to create these plans, starts in 7th grade. But ideally, there would even be career development, starting with just exploration and, what are careers, starting even younger. And so thinking through, at that point, family buy-in and, how do we, integrate some families into this project so that it's not just industry and researchers and staff from the ISD, but also the people that we're gathering data from.
I love the idea of using student voice, which we've talked about a lot. And one of the projects I recently worked on was a research practice partnership. And we were working on community issues in a rural community in South Carolina. And we had students that were from the high school that came to the discussion to share their perspectives and have other community members share their perspectives. And we were just talking about it the other day, how great the student voice was. I mean, I was blown away by what they were able to share. All right, we do have an audience question. So the question is posed to all of you. How is evaluation of the partnership performed? For example, did you create custom metrics to evaluate everything?
So for us, I think that's one of the things that we continue to think about and work on. One of the things that we recently did was, this was actually something that we got from a partner that we were working with, and we used a rubric where there were sort of like actions and where we needed to be. And then there's like a red, yellow, green. So assessing like, are we there? Are we kind of halfway there? Not all the way, you know, are we doing really well in this category? And then like a section for like reflections, challenges, you know, take notes. So like that sort of rubric where we're really self-assessing. We've also had like professional developments where we give surveys to get feedback, but that's something we are continuously thinking about to see like how effective we're being. And yeah.
Admittedly, this is a weakness of our partnership, at least from my view, that we've never really done any formal evaluation of our partnership, and I actually think that would be a worthwhile exercise to do. So yeah, maybe Joey and I can get that rubric from you, because yeah, I think we have never really stepped back and kind of evaluated, like, you know, are we accomplishing what we want to accomplish? We've been having a lot of momentum, which I think is one, in a way, metric of success. But yeah, that's not something we've really spent much time thinking about. Yeah, Lindsay and Jamie, have you had any conversations with the Ingham ISD around assessing the partnership?
Since the partnership started, it has been part of my annual evaluation. I've purposely included that as one of my goals. And so my supervisor and I have set specific goals for the partnership. And admittedly, most of them are things around timeline and what we hope the partnership accomplishes that particular year. And then also, the right word isn't coming to me. So if someone can think about it while I'm word vomiting, feel free to throw it in the chat. But something along the line of like mindset and team vibe, and like continuing to make sure that like as we're working towards these milestones, that all of our stakeholders are on the same page, that we're continuing to hear, to gather, and to respect the insight of our stakeholders. We haven't necessarily formally collected that insight from stakeholders, but we have definitely gathered it in other informal ways. And I would say we've used that evaluatively. And that has informed directions that we've taken, and we've definitely changed paths as a result of some of that data that we've collected. But I would agree with Al, if Joanna's willing to share her rubric, it would be worth a more formal evaluation.
Yes, I just shared it in the chat, and the way that we actually used this one is that we had a meeting with our partner, and this was just like something that we discussed. So like on a Zoom call, just like going through each one and having more of a conversation, as opposed to like sending out a survey and then getting it back and trying to interpret it. But just really just having a conversation about like where we're at, where we need help with, I think is best practices for assessment. And so this was like what the partner was using to assess their own like personal project, and we just kind of took it and adapted it to like what we were trying to do with all of our projects. And so, yeah, that has been, we haven't used it as much, I think, as we should, but that was, you know, like us starting to think about like how we can start assessing what we're doing in communities.
Excellent. Thank you both, or thank you all so much. We have another audience question, so I'll read it out. And for everyone listening, if you have any more, this is a great time to keep posting them. We have one more question, but I'll save that a little bit more towards the end. So one of our panelists, or not panelists, one of our audience members asked, recognizing that some of us will become research scholars who are seeking partners, I'm curious what advice you can offer about the beginning of the partnership. How do you feel about cold emails, and what would make you want to work with someone?
I'll try to answer that on the K-12 side of it. Cold emails are kind of a hard one because you just don't know who they are and where it's going. But the old school, pick up the phone and call and start a conversation. That would, for me, usually tends to work. Lindsay did a really neat thing in being able to work into and present at MSU. I think is very unique to us. Is it was just a different way to gain a contact and gain a relationship than what you would normally do. So thinking outside the box, so to speak, and again, you know, go for something, try something different, and see where it goes.
I would say the trick is finding, particularly if you're wanting to do it in a K-12 setting, although I guess any sort of, like community group would be the same way, is that you need to find an organization with the capacity to partner with you. And so if you're able to, look through websites and find an organization that hires someone with a research title. So someone like me, whose title is, research consultant, or a school district with a research department, or, someone that, someone whose job is research and evaluation. I would say a cold email to someone in that department is likely to get you a little bit further than a cold email to an organization without that kind of department or someone in a different position. Again, just because of capacity and also because of language. When I get an email from someone who explains their project, like Jamie said, I do usually pick up the phone and have a conversation with that person, because you're only able to explain so much in an email. And, I'll have them, explain a little bit more about what they want, what they need, what they're looking for. And because of my position, I'm able to speak a little bit more of the language of a researcher than the average practitioner. And that's not to say that practitioners can't speak the language of researchers. It's just to say that most of them haven't learned it yet. And so once I have a good understanding of your project, I'm then able to go advocate for your project to my department, particularly if I know that that department has a need for the research that you're doing. If you're speaking to someone who is, one, incredibly busy, two, has an inbox full of emails, and three, is struggling to understand the language of your project, and you're struggling to understand the process of K-12 education and all of the barriers that it takes to conduct, research in a classroom kind of setting. it's just a little bit more, it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, even in my situation, like if you were to pick up the phone and call me and you were to say like, hey, I want to do a research project in early literacy, you know, I want to work with this grade level of students, I want to, you know, study this element of, you know, early literacy. I have a knowledge of, you know, which districts of our 12 are most likely to say yes to a project like that. I'm able to then go to our literacy consultants and talk to them about a project like that. Whereas if you were to cold call any of our districts, you may or may not hit the district that one likes doing research in their district, and two has a need for early literacy research. And so I think just being strategic about who you contact and trying to find districts that have prioritized capacity for research can maybe be helpful.
I was going to call on Joanna to share a story about when Dr. Gray first was in your school. And this was like a sort of an extreme approach, I would say, but it worked for him. So yeah, do you mind sharing what Dr. Gray did to sort of get in to your school?
Dr. Gray is the best at getting into places, and he just sort of pops up. And so I don't know if who he called first, or if he just showed up at the school. He's known for just popping up places and just like bringing his laptop and working in the student lounge or the teacher's lounge. So I would say like a cold email just to like say, hey, can I come talk to you for 10 minutes about like some grant money that I have that I would like to bring into your school, or, you know, like a resource that you're bringing into a school, I think is a good way to come in and talk to people and meet people. But he was just like in our classrooms, just hanging out, just talking to students. I would joke a lot and be like, he would kind of stalk us, but not in a creepy way. And so, so just, I think just being present and being in schools and just getting to know people is how you really establish those relationships, because if they see you around a lot and they see that you're really doing meaningful work there, you know, then they'll likely want to establish that partnership with you, as opposed to it strictly being business, or, you know, just shooting an email and hoping for the best. I think it really does take the face-to-face or even a Zoom call to kind of, you know, have a conversation.
I love that he led with what he could offer. And that's huge, as opposed to like leading with what you need or what you want, like leading with what you can offer, I think is
And
incredible.
It's really what's been a game changer for Dr. Gray. And what I've learned is that like you come into spaces and you share your resources as a university with the school, with the space. If it's not a physical resource, it's just knowledge that we may have that they need. And so he would come in, and he had like $1 million grant, and he was going to the teachers like, hey, what do you want? I have $1 million. And we're like, oh, wait, what? So that was his approach, and that's how he sort of started the partnership with the school. And it really grew from there, where now like district wide, he's known for doing work in the district.
And even as grad students, like one thing, because sometimes people get confused. And when you say like, hey, I have a grad student that wants to work with you, people are like, you know, they want the full professor. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like grad students have a ton to offer. As graduate students, you guys have so much more flexibility. And quite frankly, you're just a lot easier to work with. And so keeping in mind, like as graduate students, you may not have that $1 million grant that Dr. De Leon has, but you have a ton of resources and you have a ton of knowledge. You have a lot that you're able to offer. And so leading with that, I think Joanna's advice is incredible.
Absolutely. And the other thing that he's always done is like treat us as grad students as his partners and his coworkers. So we never really went into spaces like, hey, we're his grad students. So it's kind of like, hey, we're Black and belonging, like I don't even think we ever, mention that, where like we really are functioning as a team, where they're respecting like our knowledge and he respects our knowledge just as much as, it would be him.
Lindsay, I think you make a great point. As grad students, we may not have the $1 million grants, but time, resources, energy, ideas, hopefully as grad students, we can still offer, something that's worth it on the other side. So thank you for sharing that. Just given time, I'm going to move to our last question that we have for all the panelists. But if there is any additional time at the end, I'm happy to read any more audience questions. So feel free to just post those in the chat. We've covered a lot of this throughout our discussion, but I think a lot of people on here want to learn, well, where do I go next? So our last question is, for people first starting partnerships, what is your number one piece of advice?
Would say give yourself and your team a lot of grace and expect to run into hurdles, expect to run into some failure, and to maintain that mindset that we preach to K through 12 education and to our students. And that's that, to view failure as part of the learning experience. Like, no two partnerships are the same. And so what works with one partnership may or may not work with another partnership. And there are going to be things that you try that, may or may not like blow up in your hands. And there's no way that you could have predicted it. And all you can do is pick up the pieces and try again and, learn from what happened, and to not let that get you down. And I think that's maybe one thing that, our team experienced, kind of a series of, okay, this failed, this failed, this failed, this failed, kind of quickly together. And it got to the point where we were like kind of down on ourselves, like, dang it, like what is going on with this project? And we had to step back and give ourselves a little bit of grace and say, this is part of learning. This is part of education. Like, we're trying to do things that no one else in the state, and from what we can tell, no one else in the nation is doing. And maybe that's for a reason. It's because it's really hard. And so to give yourself grace and to let your team fail because you're trying something big and important, and to let that be okay. Don't play it safe.
I would say doing a lot of self-reflection and being careful not to be performative. There are a lot of performative actions that are like, there are good intentions. And if we're not like constantly evaluating ourselves and asking us, like, why are we in this community and why are we doing this work? And asking ourselves the hard questions, I think we can easily, fall into some of the things that may not be good for communities. And so, yeah, consistently assessing and just making sure that what we're doing is not something performative and that we really are there for what's best for communities.
Yeah, I think I'll sort of piggyback on that point and just say care, care about your students, like, be in it for the right reasons. Why do you want to be in the research practice partnership? It should, in my view, be because you care about helping students, you care about helping teachers. And I think that's why a lot of us got involved in graduate school, in graduate study in educational psychology, is because we want to help students, we want to help teachers. And so to me, that's sort of been like, I've tried to refocus myself anytime I've seen myself get distracted of like, oh my gosh, like I have a publication I want to get out. Is that going to help students? And then recentering, like centering the students and the teachers and all of the work that we're doing together. And that needs to sort of be our common shared goal. I think that that's been really helpful. So approach your partnerships with care. That's very important.
Jamie, did you want to add anything?
I don't think I could. That was fabulous from all.
I know
all
they
of
did a great job.
you. Yeah.
We did have one last question. We have a little bit of time, so feel free. Not everyone has to answer. Whoever would like to jump in. I think it's a great question, though. Has it been the case that the existing motivational theory has gained a new perspective from RPP because of the real world scenario versus what was developed as a theory from empirical data?
Can I just say something about this? I've thought a lot about this.
Yes.
This is Brooke talking, and I just wanted to say that this is such a great question, and I think one of the assets of research practice partnerships as it pertains to like motivational literature is that there, folks talk a lot about this, there being like a research practice gap, that there's this disconnect between what we're finding, quote unquote, in our empirical studies and what teachers and students are actually like either willing or wanting to use, or what's actually been helpful. And so I think one of the benefits of research practice partnerships being a part of the literature mix in our field is that I think it helps to really ground what we're finding, like you said, in real life scenarios in a way that allows the outcomes to be more immediately helpful to the parties and folks that we're trying to study and trying to support, and so I think there just seems to be less of this gap between the research and like implementing it in this case, like educational spaces when you're partnering with those folks. Because I think it's not always easy to stay grounded on what's important to practitioners if you're just in your college setting or you're just your university setting. And there's just like, honestly, there's just different priorities. And so I think it really helps to like realign that. And I think there's a place for both, but I think that's one of the benefits that it brings.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brooke. It's a great insight to be able to see what's really going on in the classroom. Would anybody else like to add anything?
The one thing I would add is I think that sometimes working directly with partners and being closer to the ground of what's actually happening in schools helps you to see the limits of our current theory. And so you can, I think, more clearly see where those boundaries are and what theory explains and what it doesn't explain. And I've not generated any new theories, but I've gotten some sense of like, there's some limitations here, and maybe that could lead to new theory generation or adding to the extent theories that we rely so much on. And I think too, just to talk about a specific theory as an example, the expectancy value theory, like as motivation researchers, we all have that model probably in our heads floating around. In the right-hand side of the model, self-efficacy and value beliefs, the multiplicative effect on achievement and persistence is like very well studied. But the whole left-hand side of the model has not really been studied much. And one of the reasons I think that is because it's these really messy social processes. And I think that, is one area that just comes to mind off the top of my head of like, wow, that's where being closer to the ground and being able to observe sort of the messiness of classrooms would be really helpful on kind of understanding this untested, lightly tested part of the expectancy value theory model.
Yes, that's a great point.
And I think what it really does is bring theory into practice, because why are we doing all this work if it's not for key stakeholders who are on the ground to have this information and to use it. And so being able to bring it to teachers in ways that it makes sense for teachers or principals or schools, I think is really why we're doing this work. And a lot of times there's a gap between, you know, like it just staying in academia versus like us being able to actually authentically use this in practice, because, you know, oftentimes it doesn't necessarily work in practice because we're you know, there's a disconnect between how we're even like implementing it for teachers. So that's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, maybe not so much with theory, but with the other types of published research. A lot of educators get nervous when you start talking about asking them to participate, or when you talk about using their data, even if you're, you know, de-identifying it and, you know, making it as, you know, harmless as possible. A lot of teachers get super nervous because they're so used to research being weaponized and being used to tell them all of the things they're doing wrong and all of the ways that education, you know, is failing people. And they're not used to research being used to actually assist and to lighten the load, and for researchers to come in and to make their lives easier. And so when, you know, researchers like Alan Brook are able to come in and explain, you know, a theory and put it into, you know, terms that educators are able to understand, and, you know, then we're able to take that and, you know, change up how we're doing things in the classroom so that it makes processes easier, and it makes, you know, teaching, you know, students easier. When researchers are able to come in and say, you know what, let's try this one thing in exchange for these other 4 things. Let's get rid of 4 things and try this one thing instead. Then we're lightening the burden for teachers, as opposed to just pointing the finger and saying, like, these are all of the things teachers are doing wrong. Because teachers right now, as you know, a lot of professionals are just feeling incredibly burnt out, and they're feeling like the scapegoats for, you know, a lot of society's anger, and feeling blamed for the way that, you know, society is operating right now. So when researchers are able to come in and assist with some of that, it really helps.
Thank you so much for sharing. Would anyone else like to add anything else before I wrap us all up? All right, so thank you so much to our panelists. You are all amazing, and all of the work you're doing is so important and incredible. And I think we're all really motivated now to go find some partnerships or continue working with the ones we already do. So I appreciate that. I'm just going to kind of read through a few announcements that we have. So our next Motivation Monday is going to be March 27th, and it's on networking and navigating conferences. And then I think someone's going to drop it in the chat, or when I'm done talking, I will. And then we have an affinity group meeting Monday, March 13th. And Joey's on here and he runs a lot of that. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat as well. And there is a poll that you can take for picking topics. So if you'd like to, that is being also dropped in the chat, it looks like, by Corey. And then we have some exciting events at AERA to support some grad students and build community. And we are going to be offering, not me in particular, but AERA is going to be offering some sessions for getting prepared for paper sessions, roundtables, and poster presentations. So feel free to register for those. I'm actually planning to attend the one on Thursday. And then if you are a grad student attending AERA for the first time, or you would like to work as a mentor and share some information, we are dropping a link in the chat so that you can do the pre-AERA survey, but also link up with a mentor if you're interested. And then, let's see, keep out an eye for any finalized details about the Graduate Student Social and Research in Progress event. Those are all of our announcements. And again, we just want to thank the panelists for their insightful and enriching conversation. And thank you to everyone who joined us, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much. Happy Monday.